This one is going down in the history books. Republican Representative Russel Fry brought out the big guns during his committee hearing on ending political prosecutions at the state level, because he stunned the attendees with a whole video compilation of every time Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg explicitly campaigned on the promise of bringing down Donald Trump. Just take a look at this incredible exchange before I tell you how big this really is.
If you look at the actual indictments, if you look at the Mar-a-Lago search warrant, there is not an objective judge, prosecutor, or anyone else who understands criminal law who would say there's not enough evidence to charge or to go forward with the search warrant. And all you are doing is trying to create a monarchy for Donald Trump. And that's what you have been doing by yielding all of your power to him for the last 6 weeks.
The gentleman's time has expired. I now recognize the gentleman from South Carolina.
Let me just write the last word.
The gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I was going to respond. You said that this was not, Mr. Goldman, this was not politically motivated, but we know that to be the case. In fact, you live in the jurisdiction of Alvin Bragg. You campaigned with Alvin Bragg, who campaiggned on going after Donald Trump.
False.
So
he never campaigned on going after Donald Trump.
To say
the gentleman
that this
from
was
South
not
Carolina
politically motivated is not based in reality. This absolutely was. There was coordination with the Biden DOJ. That was both in the Georgia case and the New York case. And so to say that it wasn't and that we're just making it up really kind of goes against the overwhelming evidence to suggest that that's exactly what they were doing to begin with.
It's incredible that a Democrat like Dan Goldman is still trying to run with this outdated narrative, especially because of the mass perception that still exists that there was a lawfare against Donald Trump in the last 2 years, where even polls were coming out revealing that a majority of Trump supporters would vote for him even if he was convicted. And that's simply because of the lack of trust that existed in the legal system, which is exactly what this bill under debate aimed to solve. Simply put, while it hasn't yet moved ahead, the bill titled Promptly Ending Political Prosecutions and Ending Retaliation aimed to allow both former and current presidents to have their cases transferred from state cases to the federal courts to streamline the legal process and make sure state-level prosecutors like Alvin Bragg, Letitia James, or Fani Willis from America's 50 states can't just derail presidencies at will, and this is precisely where this debate took a different turn when Dan Goldman tried to strike at the knee of this rationale, only to be proven wrong with a whole video compilation of Alvin Bragg.
I think it was discussed earlier that this was not about politics and that people campaigning for district attorneys were not campaigning on going after the former president, now current president. But that, of course, is belied by the evidence, and I think we have a video to show just that.
Whoever has this job, are they going to convict Donald Trump?
Look, that is the number one issue. I'm the candidate in the race who has the experience with Donald Trump. We sued the Trump administration over 100 times. I sued Trump over 100 times and brought a case against the Trump Foundation and held him accountable. Holding Trump accountable for the Trump Foundation.
From exposing illegal behavior by the Trump Foundation.
I do have a lot of experience with the former president. I led the New York State Attorney General's work and investigation and successful litigation against him and his family for their misconduct with the Trump Foundation. And also we had a number of litigations, more than 100 involving the Trump administration. I led the team that held Trump and his children accountable for their misconduct with the Trump Foundation. I oversaw the work which sued his administration more than 100 times. I led the Attorney General's work on the Trump Foundation case where we held Trump and his family accountable. When I was at the Attorney General's office, I led our work on the Trump Foundation matter. I also led the team that did the Trump Foundation case, and I've seen him up front and seen the lawlessness that he can do. Started out as a civil rights lawyer, then became a federal prosecutor, ultimately was the number 2 lawyer in the New York State Attorney General's office, leading the charge against the racist policies of the Trump administration. I believe we have to hold him accountable. I've litigated with him, and so I'm prepared to go where the facts take me once I see them and hold him accountable. Being a rich, old white man has allowed you to evade accountability in Manhattan. That includes Trump and his children, right? We held him accountable in the Trump Foundation case. My office did the Trump University case. So I've seen a pattern of lawlessness over 20 years. And so I'm inclined to believe all I see in the public domain and know that and believe that there's a path forward there to make a case.
And yet this attorney general seems blind to the crime rate in his own state, instead explicitly campaigning on a political basis, which shouldn't even be allowed in the first place. What's funny is that the resistance to this bill is coming from the same people that alleged a whole wave of political prosecution would be coming against them at the hands of Donald Trump, and yet not taking the legal protection as this bill grants from petty state-level cases from dragging them down, even for former presidents. So it's not exactly a partisan issue, because the federal legal system is perhaps even more robust and has more than enough scrutiny to handle the president. Besides, it just makes sense for federal courts to have legal oversight over the federal executive branch, which is a bit of a constitutional crisis we saw last month when multiple lower-level district judges were throwing a spanner in the wheel of the Trump presidency on the issue of immigration, eventually halting the entire system into confusion.
So I think we go back to the basic premise of the bill, is that you have a prosecutor in New York who's not worried about crime in New York, Manhattan. He is worried about going after the former president of the United States. Why? Because it earns him political points in a jurisdiction that did not vote for Donald Trump. And so they elected this guy to go after him, despite the fact that there are other crimes that you could be going after, but resources are dedicated. And so to sit here today and say that this has not been about politics, this is about fairness in the system, it's total BS to believe that that is actually the case, because he said it a million times on television. He campaigned on it, and that is the purpose. One of the huge purposes of this bill is to remove that from a fairness perspective, that a jury in a federal system, that a different system that is not rigged in a state court can go and have a fair trial. The presumption of innocence is on a criminal defendant, and if we do this for ambassadors, if we do this for sitting presidents right now, why would we not extend that to somebody when they are targeting a former president or vice president?
Will the gentleman yield
for political
for a
points?
question?
And with that, no, I yield back.
That makes sense, because we've seen over the last 2 years, even presidential immunity is not enough to protect a former president from a barrage of criminal litigation from politically motivated actors. So if someone genuinely has a solid case against the chief executive of the country, why not take it to the federal courts, which is one streamlined system that isn't slowed down by a whole web of lower courts. And the moment that video of Alvin Bragg was played, it basically cut at the knee of the entire argument against the proposed bill. Because remember, Alvin Bragg is still at the same position of Manhattan District Attorney. There he has to be something different done to avoid legal mass of politically motivated litigation brought to courts to try and drag down political figures through these covert means.
These prosecutors have weaponized our justice system against its political opponents, and it is Congress's duty to respond, which is why I've introduced this bill and a similar bill from last Congress, which would give both current and former presidents and vice presidents the ability, not a mandate, but the ability to remove their civil or criminal cases against them from a state court to a federal district court. The new bill also expands the eligibility to remove cases also to current and former U.S. officers who are acting within the scope of their official duties or apparent legal authority related to their office. The bill also codifies the immunity recognized by the U.S. Supreme Court for official acts carried out by federal officials. The federal interests implicated by civil actions or criminal prosecutions brought against current or former presidents and vice presidents are pretty overwhelming. A federal court is the appropriate forum to adjudicate cases with such a strong federal nexus.
And that's what's really at the heart of this debate, because it wouldn't make as much sense if America hadn't seen how the legal system can slow down important political candidates by simply turning the process into the punishment. But let me know in the comments what you think about this, and share this with people that have an important voice to add, because we want to hear from you. I think we're seeing a broader realization in the American political landscape that some guardrails will have to be put in place to create more breathing room for the executive branch in an environment where it's so easy to suffocate and grind down to halt by political opponents.